Okay, so today I'm going to show you a lot of detail about how to do programming JSON, but more importantly, that this will help you to understand how do you handle homework assignment number 2. So this is part 2 of homework assignment number 2. The input is a file, which is a JSON array. And the second input is just a question. It's a time. It's also a JSON, but it's a JSON representation of time. So let me show you. So to start, I put a file which is under the GitHub, under the master directory. There is a file you can see here. It says ecs36b homework2 reference.cpp. And also there are 2 files, which is the location JSON and the question JSON. So the location JSON, you can see that it is exactly the one that you have in the homework assignment number 2 specification. It's an array of this 2 line over here. And then the question JSON is also just basically the same information from homework assignment number 2 specification, which is the timestamp we're going to use. Okay, so those 2 files are also there for you to test your program. Okay, there is a little bit detail I do want to say is when we put the double quote in Microsoft Word, it is not really a standard double quote. If you look at the double quote, it's kind of with a degree, it's kind of slided to the left. So that is not the valid JSON double quote. In JSON, if you want to do real double quote, syntactically represent a string or represent a key, you have to use the what do I call it? The standard, the traditional double quote. The way when I do the copy and paste to this file, I actually have to manually change this double quote to the standard double quote. So just to let you know, so if you want to test it, maybe it's easier for you to just download this 2 files instead of copy and paste from the Microsoft Word file, because the formatting they're using another type of double quote just looks nice. Okay. All right. So the important thing I like to go through is this file called ecs36b homework2 reference.cpp. And this program, in fact, cover a lot of detail about what you have heard. For example, operator overloading, classes, and JSON programming, and all of this kind of putting together. And so this is a good opportunity for you to kind of putting all these pieces that we have learned so far together. And it's under that directory. Okay, so let's first try to make it. Just want to tell you it's here. This is the directory after you download. Has a bunch of files. If I take make. Okay, of course, it's compiled a lot of other things because the make file, I probably should extract to make a make file that only make homework 2 reference implementation. But anyway, if you look at, I think which line it is. The last line, probably this line. You see that? This line? This line is basically compiling the ecs36b homework 2 reference.cpp. This is the compiling. And after compiling, I'm kind of linking everything together, but most of them are actually not necessary because I just convenient to link everything together. And you can see that it linked the ecs36b homework2.reference, and it generated output, which is ecs36b homework2 reference. Okay, so first let me run this program, and then we will go through this program line by line. So the way I run it is go to ecs36b homework2 reference, and if I put no argument, it basically tell me, hey, you need to have 3 arguments total. This one, and then you need the location JSON, you need the question JSON. That's according to the spec. So you need to provide 2 more argument. So let's do this is location. Sorry, homework 2, location JSON, and then homework 2, question JSON. That's those 2 files I showed you earlier already upload to the master directory. And if I run this, it actually gives you a lot of information that's actually being printed. The reason I actually printed all this is just for you to, for the purpose of instruction about showing what kind of things I need to do with this program, how to do homework too. So that's why it has a lot more output. I intentionally not going to remove this because according to the spec of the homework, you're supposed to only print 1 location. And then I will show you everything, but you need to figure out exactly how to print that line. But the information I'm going to give you today, in fact, should way cover everything you need to do that. Okay. So let's go to this code now. Okay, I want to tell you something first. Let's look at the high level design of homework 2. Okay, the first thing you need to do is, as we do, is try to check whether we indeed have 3 arguments. Okay, if you don't have 3 arguments, then that's you haven't provided the right information. So it has to be command and then the location JSON and the question JSON. You have to have a 3. Okay, so the number 2, once you get those files, the next things you need to do is try to convert this file into a real JSON. So essentially what you want to do is convert the files. I will use S because you have 2 files. You have to convert those 2 files into JSON. In fact, specifically, I will recommend you do JSON value. The one that we talk about, how do you actually create a JSON object in the previous lecture, okay, when I talk about the JSON programming. Okay, by the way, JSON value is a very rich and very powerful object. Right now, you don't need to learn a lot of them, but gradually you'll learn. But for homework assignment number 2, I already provide a lot of library to handle that. In fact, for doing step number 2, we're going to use a program under ecs36b JSON.cpp. So this is the file for you to read and understand what's going on. But you can actually do homework assignment number 2 without reading any detail about that. But in there, over there, there is a function called file to JSON. I think it's capital, file to JSON. Okay, there is a function called file to JSON. I forgot exactly capital or not capital. I have to check. It's a file to JSON. This program, this function will automatically help you to do this step. You just need to use it. Okay, you just need to call it and get this step done. So it's just 1 line of code. You can convert 1 file to a JSON. And then it actually will check whether you have any syntax error. What happens if you provide a JSON which is invalid, or this JSON doesn't have the right element in the syntax of JSON. So here you're going to this function is going to check whether this is it will check whether it is a valid JSON. So from the syntax. Okay. So number 2, you will do this. So you kind of move the file to the JSON value object. So now you can perform the next step. The next step, I will call it, you have to check whether the JSON is valid for homework assignment number 2. Okay, so what's the difference between number 2 and number 3? Number 2 is checking whether this JSON is a real JSON, but number 3 is actually checking whether this JSON is indeed an array. For example, it has to be array, right? For the first argument, it has to be array. And then for each of the element of the array, it should have 2 key value pair. Remember, 2 key value pair. And the key value pair should be, one of them is GPSDD, and one of them is time. Because if you don't, from the programming perspective, if you don't have this 2 key, then essentially this JSON does not provide the right location information. All right, so this is immediately you have to look at the homework assignment number 2. Just want to show you this is the JSON for the location. And if you look at that, each of the element, this is the array with 2 elements in the array, and each of the element has 2 key value pair. One is GPSDD and one is a time. That's not only that, but also you need to check whether the GPSDD, okay, assuming you have GPSDD, but you need to check whether GPSDD has latitude and longitude. Okay, you have to check all of this in order to make sure it's correct. If you look at this, so when people give you a file, don't always assume that this file already have everything. So you need to provide a check to see if those elements are all there. I'm going to show you how to do that. All right. So this is the step number 3. So essentially, it is the first 3 steps come here is just checking import to JSON file and checking whether this JSON file indeed is the right JSON file we expect. Okay, that is very important. Okay, here I do want to tell you the difference. I want to actually step aside to talk about the difference between JSON and the C++, and maybe other language such as Java. Python is a little bit different in this picture. So, okay, C++ is a strong type language. That means the compiler is going to help us to understand whether you have certain elements. When you define a classes, the C++ compiler will check whether you're using this variable that's already been declared in the class definition. So C, C++, Java, they all do this kind of type checking. They will check the type, and you don't have to worry about that. You know how many variables there because you declare the class in this way. However, there's another paradigm in programming we call the weak type or no type, which is like JSON. So essentially, you see that JSON, there's no such things we call schema or class definition, and such that you can shuffle everything, anything you want, like a key value pair. As long as you put a key value pair, it's there. So essentially, it's a really powerful representation because you can use this simple syntax to pretty much represent everything you want. But from the application perspective, that you have to actually check whether the things you're expecting from this JSON is really there with the right type. And that is the programming of a JSON programmer need to handle. And this is a good contrast because pretty much programming language, you either have a weak type or strong type, either one of those. And the thing is that by doing this exercise, you kind of see the difference and then to do the work. I mean, let me give you an example. When Facebook, when you request a post from Facebook, and Facebook will send you a huge JSON. I remember during Clinton and Trump's second debate on Fox News, I actually tried to download the debate posts using JSON. So there was about 400,000 comments and likes inside that huge JSON. That JSON I remember is about 20 gigabyte or something like that. One JSON, 20 gigabyte. Because it contains all the comments, all the likes, all the user ID, everything. I mean, it's just one JSON download. I mean, by the way, I kind of download this Facebook JSON since 2008, and it's really huge amount of information you can process. Okay, so the thing is that when I need to access or your browser try to interpret this JSON, it need to see whether this JSON or this post has any likes, has any comments. So it has to check whether the key value pair, there is a one key, I wish I show you the real one, but this key here, it says comments. If you don't have any comments, then essentially you don't have that key value pair, and therefore that means this post, nobody actually made a comment. If you actually have a comment, guess what? That comment must be an array, because comment is not just one comment, it's usually an array of 400,000 comments. So the thing is that the comments is an array, and I have to actually check whether this JSON 20 gigabyte really has whatever information I would like to get. Okay, so that's kind of the power about when you have a JSON, you need to do this kind of check. Okay. All right, so this part so far is just checking whether it's a valid. Okay, so I want to stop here without showing you the rest of the plan, but I want to show you the real code for this 3-step, and then we will move on. Okay, any question before I start looking at the code? Okay, so let's actually look at the code. The first part of the code, I would say this is a step number 1, right? I'm checking. Step number 1, I'm actually checking whether the argument ARGC is equal to 3 or not, right? So if it's not equal to 3, I just basically print out, hey, you need to provide location JSON and question JSON. After I print out the error message, I just quit. Okay, so there are multiple ways I can handle this. That's why we're going to talk about exceptional handling toward the end of the quarter. But right now, I'm just quit. Okay, if you don't give me the right thing, I quit immediately. So I return -1, which means that it exits from the main function, the program quits. Okay, that's step number 1. Okay, let's look at step number 2 is here. So the first thing I try to look at is, you see I declare the first line here. I declare an object, which is a JSON value object, this line. So I declare, let me move the cursor a little bit. So I declare an object. The object is called location underscore JV, right? Okay, that's the variable or variable name for an object called location underscore JV. And the class of that object is called JSON value. That's the very powerful class I want to start showing you more about how to use this object. In fact, the whole JSON programming, if you learn how to use JSON value, you already can handle like 100% of the problem. Okay, all right. So that is the object I create, and now I'm going to use this program. Oh, it's not file to JSON, it's a my file to JSON. Okay. Let me update this a little bit. I will use my file to JSON. And this program, what we did is that the my file to JSON take 2 arguments. The first argument is the file name of the file that contains the JSON. And the second one should be a pointer to a valid JSON value object that you can actually put the result into that particular location. Okay, so So it takes two arguments. What's argument one? Remember, argument 0, if you remember when we run the program, argument 0 is /ecs whatever, and argument 1 is homework2 location JSON, right? All right. So so essentially what I did is I do my file to JSON argument 1, which is the location.json. And then I want to put the converted result JSON into this object called location_JV. All right. And then the only thing I did is that I actually check whether the RC, because it has a return code, RC stands for return code. If RC is a 0, that means there is no error. But if RC is not equal to 0, that means your how do I say that? Your JSON has a syntax error that it cannot convert to a valid JSON value. So that's the RC. So that's why I check. If RC is not equal to 0, then I quit as well, because provide a wrong JSON. So programming, you will see a lot of code. In fact, 80% of your code is not doing the correct thing. It's actually checking the incorrect thing. By the way, when you write real program, because you never know what kind of input you're going to receive. You never know what kind of network packet is going to deliver to your server. You never know what kind of things your smartphone is receiving from a web link that you never realize. So there's a lot of code in the code we're using is doing things like this. We're checking. If we're checking, realize, oh, something is wrong, we just throw it out. Okay. So by the way, there is a big transition from ecs36a to ecs36b. Is that 36a you handle, how you can solve a problem, but 36b you actually start to realize a lot of things you need to worry about is how to avoid certain problems. Okay, not solve the problem, but avoid a lot of problems by doing a lot of checking. Okay. So that basically helped me to convert. That's step 2, to convert the location JSON. And similarly, you look at this part of the code. This is actually the second argument, right? The question, I mean, if you look at compare syntactically, there's two pieces of code. They have the same structure. They have exactly the same structure. I define a JSON, but this time I define a JSON called question JSON, JV, and I use my file to JSON, but this time I'm actually using argument 2, which is the question.json, the third argument, and then it's the M, which is a pointer, the reference to the question JV. So after that, after we've done 2 of this, we are already successfully move the, how do I say that? We move the file, the JSON in the file, into the JSON value object in the C++ program. Okay, after you've done this. I just want to show you where it is for the my file to JSON. I over many years, when I developed curriculum for ecs36b, I actually realized there is a bunch of tool which is quite powerful for us to just call it and use it. So you can use it, but I think it's also very valuable for you to actually take a look at the code and then understand what the code was doing in order to accomplish this job. Okay. But by the way, there was one student who come talk to me during the office hour, and then I forgot why we got to that point, but basically I mentioned there are 2 different ways to helping students to learn programming. The first way is more traditional. The instructor basically give you every single syntactic semantic feature about the language. So you kind of learn every single subject like follow a textbook. And then for each of the subject, you kind of do some homework, and then you learn that. That's one way. That's a traditional way of learning programming. I'm taking a different way. sometimes I feel is good for me to communicate with you. So my belief, number one, the programming language is really so much things you need to learn. It's just keep changing. It's not like a calculus. You actually develop once, pretty much calculus hasn't changed for hundreds of years, the basic concept. But programming, it changed so much. Even C++, it changed so much from 1986, 1987, when I first wrote my first C++ program until now. It's keep changing. So it's technically impossible to learn every single feature in the language. And therefore, how do you actually learn? Another way to learn is my instructional objective is not for you to learn a specific feature, but my instructional objectives is make sure you establish a habit that whenever you actually encounter a problem which you don't know what to do, you don't know which feature, you actually go to find some online sources to find somebody else's code. My code, for example, or somebody else's code, Stack Overflow. And from that code, you actually try to see what is the key issue. And from that process, you actually learn. And I mean, there are pros and cons about this, and this approach might not suitable for every single expectation from the student. But the good thing is that capability is very essential when you go to work as a professional programmer. So professional programmer, we just have to keep learning new things. And the thing is that I don't need to learn all the things I'm not using for next 30 days. Okay, I only want to know a little bit enough for me to do my current work. And I can ask for help. I can ask other people a little bit help. What does this, what kind of tool? And through that process, you grow your profile. Okay, so I like to, so in other words, what I try to balance this two goals is that instead of have you to write a lot of code, I try to push the student to read a lot of code, to read some of the code has been written, provided related to the target. Okay, that is, for example, the final project, you're going to look at the whole code and try to extend. I mean, it's impossible for you to learn every single line of code, to be honest with you, but you should learn enough so you can make changes. That's the style. So I want you to show you a little bit about this code. The ecs.json.cpp. So let's look at my file to JSON. Okay, so this is the program I call. This is under ecs36b JSON.cpp. By the way, if you submit homework 2, you want to use just like what I did. This is totally legitimate to say my file to JSON using this code. So just make sure you include this file as well in your submission. Okay, make file and all the relevant codes, or whenever the TA type make, it will have all the element there. So if you look at this code, it's actually using my file called another function called my file to string. And then it's actually just take two arguments. One argument is the file name, one argument is JSON value. Okay, so first is actually call a function called my file to string with only the file name. And after you've done this, if the file string is okay, and then it will call another function called my parse JSON. Okay, so let me tell you what is my file to string. This code, the way it developed is that I first try to read the file into as a C string, as a C string or C++ string. Let me check. It's a C string, yes. I actually, if you look at the first one, this is called C string. If it's a character star, it's a C string, not C++ string. So the first one, I wrote another function which is called my file in the same source code. My file to string. I convert the file into a string, a C string, into my memory. And the second thing is that I actually just do a my parse JSON. My parse JSON is the real function. I actually read the string. I convert the string to the pointer, JV pointer, which was the argument, the second argument into my file to JSON. Okay, so essentially I got the string, and my parse string is convert the string to this JV pointer. Okay, to convert it from the string to the JSON object. Okay, so I kind of doing this kind of free transition from file to C string to JSON value object. Okay, so that is the organization of the code. And I just want to tell you a little bit about my parse JSON, which is important. How do I check whether this JSON is correct or not? Here's my parse JSON. So you can see that this, I'm going to neglect the detail, but you can see here, I'm using the function that's actually provided by the JSON CPP library. Over there, I have to have something called reader, and then the reader has a parsing function to actually check. This is not my code, it is the JSON library's code. It actually has a code for you to check whether the input string is a valid JSON. If it's a valid JSON, it will convert it to a JSON value object. So that's what this particular program is doing. So you can see that if I don't provide this library, the student pretty much, you have to write all this code. All this code I show you and try to solve this problem. But this kind of operation is so commonly happen in programming because okay, by the way, why do we need JSON? Number one, I think there's another question people ask me, why do we need to learn JSON? There are multiple reasons that we have to learn JSON. I mean, number one, Facebook, Google use JSON pretty much all the time. But the most important reason for the object-oriented programming perspective is if you write a program, say this program create 1 million objects. Assuming you write the C++ program, you create 1 million objects. 1 million, by the way, 1 million objects is considered a medium, smaller size, okay, system. I mean, if you think about the system that's the like a Twitter, Facebook they're dealing with, I mean, that number must be in the billions. Okay, assuming you have a 1 million object, that's considered it's a small size object-oriented program. You wrote a program like that. When you kill it, you type Control-C, or the program exit because of the error. Where are those 1 million objects? If you have 1 million object, the program quit. Where is that 1 million object? I just want to tell you it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. Next time you run the same program, you have to recreate those 1 million objects in general. Unless what? Unless you make those 1 million objects to be persistent. So all the concept you learned so far, programming until this stage, all your data is transient. Transient means that when you kill your program, it's gone. When you malloc a memory, when you kill your program, Control-C, your malloc, whatever memory is gone. Okay, so in practice, without persistent object, your program is really limited to handle anything big. So how do we make things persistent? We have to use file. We have to use file. We have to store the data to a persistent storage like a file. The file could be locally on your hard disk, or a file could be on the cloud, or a file could be somewhere in another remote server. Okay, so which means that when you want to store your object to a file, that file has to have some we call intermediate representation of the object. And JSON today, from the past 20, actually from the past 30 years, and I expect at least next 10 years will be the JSON format. I mean, JavaScript was developed. I remember the first time I looked at JavaScript was about 1996, 1995. So that's why I said it has already 20 years ago. Okay, it's JSON. By the way, before JSON's time, when I did my PhD, the internal format is called ASM1. ASM.1. That's a different format, but around 95, people switched to do JavaScript related. That's why it's JavaScript object notation. ASM1, I think is, I forgot what A stands for, but S is a syntax notation or something like that. Okay, so why you have to have this intermediate notation is because if you just look at the memory, the C++ memory, you copy it as a file, and then when you open the file, you try to reestablish that 1 million object, unless your environment is exactly the same environment when you save those objects in C++. Otherwise, it won't work. So for example, if you save the object using Mac, and you try to open it using Windows machine, it won't work if you try to save the memory, because the memory layout is going to be mostly is going to be very different. But if you store everything in JSON, then you know, regardless, you're using your smartphone, you use your cloud, you use your Mac, it will be exactly the same because the JSON format is exactly the same. That's why JSON becomes so popular. It's so useful for you to actually handle. It actually, the other thing to learn JSON is that it provides a different perspective of object-oriented language design. C++ is strong type. You have to define everything clearly. Compiler is going to do that. And JSON is more like Python, which doesn't rely on the compiler. It's basically as you go, you can actually develop your stuff. Okay. All right. So that's the code for the for this part. Okay, now I want to go back to the program. So we already take care of step 1 and step 2, I hope. Okay, step 1, check the arguments. Step 2 is basically try to convert it to JSON from the file to a JSON. Okay, so now we have step 1, step 2. Now I want to check whether the JSON I just obtained from my file to JSON is actually contain the correct key value pair that I'm expecting. So let's see how I do this. So you will see a lot of if then else statement. Not if a lot of if then else, but one huge if statement. Okay, this part is now I'm going to handle the array, but let's look at the first thing I check. The first thing I check, now I'm going to do step 3. Okay, I'm going to process the array for the location, right? So the first thing I need to check is whether this JSON is indeed an array. A valid JSON might not be an array. It might be something else. Okay, as we say, it could be a basic value, it could be an object or whatever. But the first thing I need to check whether it's an array. So this is the way to check the array. So you say the JSON object, which is the location underscore JD, is JSON column value. I said dot is array. Is array is one of the function that's actually giving me the check, and the member function is array is going to return either true or false. So I would say it has to be equal true, then I will do the rest. If it's a false, I just basically get out, exit. So I think it's a good time to want to show you about how do you find out whether you have a function called isArray. So CPP JSON value, I think it's value. Yeah, this one. Okay, look at this GitHub link. This is basically, we call a reference page. This link, by the way, is very useful. I probably should share this link with you so you know where to get it. But this link is really useful. It basically shows us the C++ JSON value class reference. And so if you look at the function, it has a lot of function. But look at this. It has a bunch of is a. Look at this part. This is all about is null. Let me make it bigger. It has a function called is null, is bool, is integer, is unsigned integer, is integral, is double, is numerical, is string, is array, is object. Is convertible to whatever value type as well. Okay, so you can see that there's a bunch of member function. As long as you convert that string or file into a JSON object, then now you can use any of this function to check whether that value is what you're expecting. Okay, now let's come back here. So this part is just check whether it's array, right? So once you know if it's array, I actually need to go through, if it's array, I actually need to go to a loop to go through each element in the array, right? I need to go through each element in the array. And therefore, you can see the code is I check, well, what the first question you will ask in a JSON, if it's an array, how many elements you have in the array? And the element of the array is another function called size. It's also defined here. You see size. Size is the number of value in the array or object. That's called size. There is another function called size. So that's why I'm using this. And then for each of the element, you see that I'm doing location underscore JVI. Okay, that's the index. I actually go through every single element, follow that array. So it's just the way we write C program using array to iterate through every single element in a JSON array. Okay, so now you see I check everything over here. This A line. Okay, by the way, this A line was everything I said. Remember I said I have to check a lot of things. I have to check whether JSON is valid for homework 2. I said it has to check with array. We're done, right? And we have to check each element, whether they have a 2 key value pair, GPSDD and time. And GPSDD, we have a latitude, longitude. So in other words, I have to check whether it has GPSDD, has time, has longitude, it has a latitude. And the type is actually correct. So let me actually show you, because JSON is a weak type, so I have to check everything. So let's see. The first thing I check is whether location JVI, which is whatever index, and then I said the next key value is what? Is GPSDD. Whether this GPSDD is null. So is null over here. If you actually provide a JSON doesn't have GPSDD, then this is null, is going to tell you that yes, it is. You don't have this. So that's why it's null. And therefore, it will actually fail this test of not true. And then the whole program will die. Let's just try to run it and see what happens. So let me modify location, JV. Homework 2, location, JV. Okay, the first element, let me actually change this GPSDD to GPSEE. Okay, I changed that to, so I lost one of the valid attribute key value pair. Okay, now if I run the program, okay, it basically tell me, okay, it parse the first, by the way, this part is okay. It's actually getting back from my file to JSON. And this is my file to JSON for the second one. So this is the step 1, step 2. And now I'm step 3 when I try to look for GPSDD. It basically say it's a content error because the content, I didn't actually print out a lot of information about why you have this error, but it basically detects that you don't have GPSDD. If you don't have GPS DD, I'm going to cut it off immediately. I better change it back. If I change back, everything works back normal. Okay. All right. So let me go back to my program. So let's actually look at this A check. This 8 lines of code, it might actually looks kind of a lot. I mean, why do you have to check a lot of code? Remember I said 80% of your code is actually doing this kind of thing. In fact, in JSON program, I realized that's probably true, at least for my style, because a lot of code, I need to just do all this check. But there's another piece of code that associated with this is called exceptional handling. So when I fail any of this test, is actually going to handle, I mean, if the program is like ecs36b homework 2, I don't care, exceptional handling, I just fail. So that's fine. But if you think about that, if you have a smartphone application that when you're actually missing something that you don't want your user to actually look at an error message and then they will tired of this and then to throw away. So you need to write a lot of code how to react to this exception. That's why we need to learn what is the best way to do exceptional handling. And exceptional handling, by the way, it also create lots of code within that 80% of the code you are going to develop. So I want to tell you, because this A line, it happened a lot to me when I want to write a program. Okay, let's look at each line. Make sure you know why every single line is necessary for you to be able to accomplish this task. Okay. The first line is just check whether you have a GPS DD, right? And the second thing, remember, what is GPS DD? If you look at, oh, I don't want to do this. And what is GPS DD? Let's look at the specification here. So this is the first element. And this is the first GPS DD. That's a key. Okay, so can someone tell me what's the data type of the value for the key GPS DD? Remember what kind of type we can have? We can have number, string, object, array, true, false, and null, right? Those 7 different values for the JSON value. So can someone tell me so GPS DD with double quote is the key. Can someone tell me what should be the expected value for the GPS DD? The key value, the value. It's an object, right? Because you see that I have a curly bracket right after the column. So it is after GPS DD is an object, and that object contains 2 key value pair, longitude, latitude. Okay, so that's why the second check is whether is an object. So basically the check is that it cannot be null and it has to be an object. So this 2 check is just to guarantee that level of accuracy about your JSON. Okay, so that's 2 lines over here. And after you have that level, then I'm going down to another level, because if your object, if you exist, if you're an object, the next thing I want to check is whether you have latitude, whether you have a longitude, and your latitude is a number or double, and latitude is also. So you can see the next 2 lines is I actually check. You see the line is just keep adding. I have location, JDI, GPS DD, and the next level is a latitude. And then you say dot is null. You want to check whether you actually have a latitude. If you don't have a latitude, I will kill it. It's null, and then you check whether the latitude is double. Okay, by the way, any number is double. If you put 1.0, 1.2 is double. If you just put 1, 2, 3, 4, It looks like integer, it still can count as a double because it's convertible. Okay, so it's double and then it's true. So it has to be non-null and it has to be a double. Then similarly, I'm going to do longitude with the same thing, whether the longitude is null, whether the longitude is double or not. There's two. Okay, so this sixth line basically cover the validity about the GPS portion of the JSON. I actually cover that. Okay, and then we're going to do the next two line is just time. The time is actually simple because the time part is just a key value pair. The key is time and the value is just a string, right? So let's see what we do. Time, I just say location I time is null, cannot be true because we want the time to be there. And the second thing is I check whether the time is a string. If it's a string, then that's okay. So you can see that this A line, after I check all this A line, at least I know the content, their format is what I expected. And all the necessary elements that I expected to do my subsequent processing are all there. Okay, this A line actually helped me to do that. So pretty much right now, after this, we have done step 3. Okay. So the other thing we talk about is JSON is a intermediate represent language for object. Okay, so I actually already done the 3 step. All right. Any question before I go to the next step? Is that good? Yes, please. Sorry, you said the is null is just, if I understand your question correctly, if it's saying that is null, that means that this JSON doesn't have this particular key. So
like you're calling is object kind of also I'm just trying to understand
why you need to call what?
both is null and object.
Oh, I see. I got it. I got it. So let me give you an example. Is null is just saying that whether you have that key, but is double or is object is actually seeing that whether the data type of the value part is actually what you're expecting. So let me give you an example. I think it's a good question for clarify. So let's modify here. So I have this JSON. Okay, now look at what I did. I changed the latitude to be a string. I changed that to be a string. Okay, and maybe the string is saying that it's Costco. Okay, so it's still a key, is still latitude, but the value is not correct as a double, right? So is null is just checking whether you have this latitude, and is double or is object is actually checking whether this portion is what you expected when you receive it. Does that make sense? Well, okay. Let me tell you that CPP might crash. You might got a segmentation fault. Let me tell you why. Because if that object is not there, if that key is not there, so essentially you don't have that portion of the object. If you try to directly check the value part, it basically gives you segmentation fault in some cases because you don't have that. You don't have that portion. And if you look at the internal representation, is try to array index to something, it doesn't exist. So it will give you that's why I not only have this A check, but I will have to follow in order. So first, if it's not null, then I'm going to check the next one. Okay, it's pretty much like the way you handle pointer. Okay. Okay, good question. Does that let me just show you if I do this, if I run it. Yeah, it's again give me a syntax error because it checked, we realize that's not the value that is expected. Okay, so let me change this back. What was the number before? 1.1 or something? I would just say 1, okay? It's fine. Because integer is considered as double. I can actually run it again. Yeah, it's still the same thing. Okay, any other question? Okay, now let's do step 4. So up to this point, after step 3, we already have an array. And from this array, we will be able to get all the right information, such as time and such as location. So number 4, what I'm going to do is I would actually put it here. Number 4, I need to establish some kind of record to put the GPS information together with the timestamp. Because remember, the whole purpose of this homework is that such that I will be able to find out where you are at certain time. So I need to associate each of your move about your time and your location. So essentially, I need to define a new data structure. I'm actually using a C structure for struct HW2 item. I probably should change the name for HW2 move or something like that. But in this structure, I contain 2 objects. So one object is GPS, the other object is a timestamp. I use my library under the same directory called JB time. So I actually have a new struct called homework2 item, which represent each of the record in the array in the C++ world. So I have 2 C++ objects. One is called GPSDD, one is called JB time. Okay. So the first thing is, well, how many elements do I need? Because I need to have that exactly the same number as the number of element in the array. I just read it from the location.json. So what I should do is, okay, first, okay, let me actually first tell you the way I do it. Now you might be familiar with this part. This is a pure C programming at this moment. So what I did is I create a pointer to the struct HW2 item. And remember in C, pointer is the same as array. Pointer array, they were the same thing. Pointer array, unsigned integer, they're all the same. Address, they're all the same. So that's actually really confusing. If you haven't learned, that's kind of the horrible design for the single language that mixed up so many concepts together. But anyway, take a look at this line. I actually define an array called HW2 item array, which is actually a pointer to that data structure. Okay. And then I set it to be null. But inside here, this 2 line is I actually allocate the space. So I use dynamic memory allocation because I didn't know initially how many elements in the array. I don't want to use static allocation because I might declare too many or too few of them. So I have to wait until I know it is an array. If it's an array, then I know I can use location JV.size, which tell me how many elements. So look at the way I use malloc. I'm actually dynamically allocate memory to HW2 item array, which I declare over here. And then I do malloc. What's the way I do malloc? Size of the struct HW2 item, which contain enough memory to host both a GPS and a timestamp. That's one element. But how many elements do I have? Is location underscore JV.size, which is number of element in the array. So if I allocate this amount, I actually have the array for the whole C++ or C array to do this kind of association between the GPS location and the record. Okay, so that's how I allocate the memory. This is refresh your knowledge about dynamic memory allocation. Okay, now I'm going into the array. Okay, you see that array, I'll just show you, and then I do all this check. If the check is correct, now let's actually take a look what I did. If the check is correct, look at what I did. I first create two double, which is latitude and longitude, and I actually convert all this value. I know it's double, so now I can do S double. So by the way, there are two set of function under JSON library. Let me go back to the this. So you see that I show you a bunch of code is whatever something. This is I show you for the check. But then when you really do the conversion, you have another set of S function. As C string, S string, as integer, as unsigned integer, as integer 64, whatever, as double as well. Okay, you can actually do all kind of conversion that way as well using as. So is and as are probably two of the most popular function you will use in the programming JSON, using JSON C++. Okay. So what I did is I actually convert this whatever key I already checked, they should exist, and the type is double. And I use this part and I call S double. I convert that value to LV latitude, LV longitude. And look at what I did next. I create an object, GPS object, using what do we call that? Bracket initialization. That's the constructor. I create a GPS object called LVS GPS object and put the LV latitude and LV longitude, which I actually will be initialize a GPS object. And finally, you see what I do is that array, I just dynamic allocate called HW2 item array I dot GPS, which is the GPS, the first attribute is LV GPS object. Okay, so now let me go back to the step 4 a little bit. What we're doing right now is actually create this struct item with the first attribute is GPS, the second attribute is LVT and JVT, sorry. So here over here, I just basically using that array and dot GPS and then assign that value to that. So essentially I'm assigning that C++ object, LV GPS object into that array. And this is a copy, by the way, it's not a pointer, it's copy that value to a memory that's dynamically allocated, meaning that when you exit a certain portion, the value will still be there, okay? So that's how we handle this. And then similarly, I'm actually doing this for the time. And the way to do the time is very, very similar. I actually pull out the time as a string because the time is a string. And I change that time string to call time s. This is, I'm just creating a C++ string called time s, follow the s string. And then this part is a constructor you're probably not so familiar with. This is a JV time. And in the JV time, I create an object called LV JV time object. And inside the constructor, I actually using that string. But using that string, what happened is I look at the difference. I create a string as a C++ string. But when I initialize the JV time, I actually use time s dot C string. Okay, by the way, C string is a converter from the C++ string to C string. By the way, I feel this is a bad design. I admit that's my design. I screwed it up, sorry. But I want to show you what I did. I don't know why I did that, but probably because I'm more of a C programmer than C++ programmer, so I always use C string a lot. So look at the constructor. JV time, colon, JV time. Okay, you look at this. See, this is the way I actually process the constructor JV time. I actually declare as a traditional C string. Okay, and then I use the C string to parse the format. You see that that's the format. That's the standard time format for representing time zone and all the way to the seconds. Okay, so that's the constructor to convert. So it's essentially convert that string we talk about into year, months, date, hour, minutes, seconds, and then the time zone information. So everything is included over there. So that's the JV time is actually quite useful because it can handle the time very relatively easier. Okay, it uses a lot of Unix system call to obtain time related information, and it did a lot of check. I mean, for example, you can see that did I tell you that I have to check everything? You see that this is when I do a time parse, I actually have to parse everything, check everything. This is all checking because I have to check whether this time string is actually valid. This particular time string is actually valid. Somebody forget this and have a typo and things like that. And so there's a lot of things could go wrong, and basically I have to build up the checker. That's why now you have another example why the code I need to do the checking, handling error is actually the majority of the code I wrote. Okay. Okay, anyway, let's go back to the code. I'm optimistic I can just finish this ecs36b reference code. So you basically have all the elements to work on this. Okay, so this part you can see that I construct an object called LVJV time object, and then again I'm actually using that dynamically allocated homework 2 item array I dot JVT, the second attribute from the homework 2 item, and I copy the value of the LV JV time object into that. Okay, so having done this, I essentially convert all my element from the JSON into the pair of C++ object, which is GPS and JV time. Okay, now you have a time and things together. Okay, so all right. Finally, we have to handle the question. Step 5, is that step 5? Yeah, step 5. Okay, step 5, we have to handle the question, right? So the first part is just checking whether the question is valid or not. 5.1 is just checking the question is correct, whether it's a correct question. Okay, so you can see I'm actually checking the same thing. I'm checking whether the question JV time is null or question time is a string. I have to do both. If it's okay, then I just basically convert that time as a string, and then I have that. Okay, and now I'm actually going to 5.2. I'm going to create a an object. Yeah, see here, I create a 5.2. I create a JV time object for comparison. Okay, I create a JV time object for comparison because I'm actually using, this is what I call a reference time, the question, to compare the timestamp in each of the element in the array. Okay, that's 5.2. So now after I create this, by the way, I will upload the revised version after the class, so you will get it. And then after that, I just need to do 5.3. 5.3, I have to compare every element in the array until we found the correct element and its GPS location. Okay, this part, I actually not give you exactly what you need to do, but I'm actually give you some idea, enough that you can do. So I need to go through each location and I assume the element in the H2 item array is already follow the order of the timestamp ascending, because the original JSON array we got is actually sorted with the timestamp. So that's the assumption. If that assumption is not true, you need to do one more thing to sort the HW2 item array to make sure it was sorted according to the timestamp. Okay. All right. So now, assuming that this is array, you can see that this is still using this array. But now let me actually tell you what I did. This is the magic place. Don't worry this part. This part is just print out information, okay? But this is the magic place. I'm actually taking the JVT question. What is JVT question? Is a object. It's JV time object. It's a time I create this object from the question.json. It's the question I want to ask. And I use this minus the HW2 item array I.jvt. What is that? That was that particular element in the array, their JV time portion of that array element. And I actually take that element out and take this, I actually minus this two. I minus this two. Okay, what does this mean? Anybody want to give a guess? What is this doing? This line. Take a look at this line. This is actually one way you can actually solve the problem for your homework assignment number 2. I give you this mechanism. What is this trying to do? What does that mean when I want to subtract one object from the other object? What does this remind you regarding the concept we have learned so far? This is operator overloading. I'm overloading the minus. I give a minus operator for a pair of JV time objects, such I can actually see the difference between those two. By the way, the number I got over here, I don't know why it's double, but it's actually seconds. So the difference is that what is the time difference between these two timestamps as in seconds. But if this time is newer, then the value is going to be positive. If this value is older, of the time is older, then the value is going to be negative in seconds. That's exactly what we want, right? We want to compare those two timestamps. In fact, we don't care that much about whether how many seconds difference, but we care about which one is older, which one is new. I'm actually using this minus sign, operator overloading, to just give me positive and negative. Okay, so let me first tell you what is that function. Yeah, I still have 6 minutes. I should be enough to do this. I want to go back to jvtime.cpp. If you look at jvtime.cpp, if you look at operator overloading, minus, okay, this is operator overloading. And I'm actually calling a function called diff time. Okay, I'm calling a function called diff time over here. It's actually have certain kind of time. But by the way, that's the beauty about having a class such as JV time, because in an operating system like a Unix, there are so many, at least 3 different representation about time. And the thing is that each of the function you want to run may be only available for one particular time representation. So I kind of hide all the detail about the different time representation inside an object. So inside there, I do all kind of conversion. If you see that, I actually have to call MK time to convert it to one of the representation in order for me to use diff time. Okay, so that's being hidden, but the code is there. You can take a look. So if you take a look at man, you can do man diff time. So diff time, you can see there's so many times that are associated with the one particular notation, standard C, and then you have to include time.h. And here is the diff time. Diff time is here. You see that diff time, you include 2 time t, and then the diff time is giving you a double as a difference in seconds. Okay, that's the detail. At one point, you want to develop your own stuff, so you know that go use man and find out what you need to do with this. But in your license, you never need to worry about time. Don't even bother to learn. Okay, don't learn the ECF36A. You don't need to learn the ECF36B as well. Okay, but you know it's probably there if you look into the code. That's why I said my instructional philosophy is always try to push students to learn the way to explore, to find out the information instead of just statically learning subject A, B, C until Z. Okay, that's just clarifying what I'm doing. Okay, so now let's try to run the program. Let me actually tell you what I did in this last part of the code, which I think I have 4 minutes. That should be enough. Okay, so what I did over here, I declare a variable called time diff, which is a double. And I subtract the question to the time in each of the element. And I actually print out what's the difference. Okay, so let's take a look. Let me to make it not distracting, let me actually get rid of this routine. Let me get rid of this. Let me get rid of the print so I can just focus. Okay, look at the last 2 elements. So when I have that reference time, when I compare array index 0, the time diff is 1801, which is a positive value. And the second element, when the array index is 1, the time difference is negative. So which means that the timestamp in question to the second timestamp is 5400 seconds in the using time diff. Okay, by the way, time diff is using function using the function the granularity is to the second, but the other function, I said there are multiple ones. The other one, you can go down to microsecond, depending on what you need to do. Okay, so there's, I mean, the days and time in Unix is not that trivial unless you have the opportunity to use it. Okay, so you can see that now you have a way to tell which one is. So let's just check. Let me change the question a little bit to make it both positive. I still have a little bit of time. So I have a question is 2024. So let me change this to 2025. Let me change to 2026. Okay, I changed this to a timestamp in the future. Okay, I'm expecting both of them to be positive and with a huge number of seconds. So now you see that is a number he doesn't even want to represent as a good way of integer. So both of them are positive. And is like, this is what, 6 million seconds or something like that? Because it's 2 years ahead of us. Okay, so just let you know that that's the way you can actually tell. If it's a positive, you know that, okay, this particular timestamp you're asking is indeed. So there's a one case I want to say is that if you check for the element, and remember I said, if you hit the negative, you know that you must be a position in the previous positive, right? If you hit a negative, your position should be aligned with the last positive location, because when you have a negative, that means it's already in the future. So what happened if you actually check every single element with a question that all of them are positive? What does that mean? Where you are? You're actually in the last positive because you don't have a negative. So the last element in the array, the location is your current location. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's assumption. It might not be perfect, but it's a way to handle it. Okay. I better change that back. I don't want to if I keep adding this, I'm going to have an integer overflow, which is another problem. I don't want to talk about that right now. Let me change this to 2024. And I want to run the program again. Okay, it's a one positive, one negative. So in this case, the GPS location should be the first GPS location because the second one is there. Okay. Any question about everything I said today about homework 2? I hope you have a lot of information about how to handle homework 2. It's okay if you want to use this code, no problem. Reference code is for you to use, but you must guarantee that whatever you submit, put together can compile, and you don't want to include any irrelevant code. You only include the code that you need to produce exactly. For example, I print a lot of stuff. It's just for debugging, for instructional, but you should follow precisely what HW2 part 2 specify what kind of things you should print it out. Okay, you should do exactly that. Okay. All right. If you have a more question, you can come to my office hour today.